Okay, that's good. That's about all. He did that just right. That's about all the smoke you need. We just want to throw off the guard bees, just enough to scatter them, right? Oh, you guys know what you're doing. Look at that. You just wedge that hive tool in between there and pop it off. Are there any bees in there?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. I brought a box down and there should have been bees in it, but I don't know. How do we know if there's no bees? There's none at the top bar, so let's take it apart. Okay, let's take it apart and see if we can diagnose what went wrong. They were alive last 2 weeks ago. Any guesses so far what might have happened? You can look down the frames and see.
Oh, there's dead bees.
Is that,
Okay. That helps. That's better than no bees at all. They didn't just disappear. So we'll have a chance of guessing what went wrong.
is this evidence of I think dysentery? Is that what it is?
I don't see much. Okay. So, all right, did the bees starve?
No.
Well, we got capped
No,
over
they've got
honey.
Honey right there.
Right, there's honey right there, and the cluster was right there.
Can you tilt it up for me?
There's granulated honey right there and bees, so we don't think they starved. Let's take out another frame and see,
So
see
something
what else.
happened to them?
We're going to try to figure out what happened to them, but it's increasingly harder and harder. Some of the experts in the business right now don't know what happened. Now look at that one. We have brood that's capped over, and we have on that side honey right here on the same frame. We have part of the cluster right there.
Look at the bees that have burrowed in there.
Their tails are sticking out there, and we have brood that was in progress but didn't emerge. Let's try another frame. Honey in the middle of it.
Why is it so dark? Is there a reason?
You'll see the darker comb in the middle and then lighter comb on the corners. Each time that a cycle of brood goes through a cell, the pupa spins a cocoon inside the wax cell. And each time there's a cocoon spun, it gets darker and darker.
Keep going.
Keep going, let's keep going. We'll see if we can figure out what went wrong. I'm not expecting to. At the end of this, I'll probably just tell you we don't know. We might figure it out. That's just empty comb. I don't see anything in there. A little honey on that side, maybe?
Yep.
Yeah, on that corner there's a little bit of honey, but other than that, it's just
Some dead bees that have burrowed in.
a few dead bees. Typically, when they're starving, you'll find them head first in the cell with their tails sticking out. That's another frame that's mostly empty in the middle, some honey in the corners.
Has it been cold enough for them to freeze to death?
It hasn't since we checked on these a week ago. It hasn't gotten cold enough for them to freeze.
How strong was it then? Maybe they swarmed.
Well, so we don't see any evidence of swarming. If they swarmed, we would see
Oh, there's quite a bit of honey
Queen
on
cell.
this one.
there's plenty of honey on that one. We know they didn't starve.
Heavy.
Sometimes the bees won't move away from their brood. So let's go back to the frame here that had some brood on it, the second one. If the bees have a patch of brood here and it gets cold and they go into a cluster, they're reluctant to abandon that brood, even though there's honey over here. But we see the bees over here, they're on honey, they're right on top of it. So I don't believe they starved. The brood pattern looks okay. It's not spotty, it's not diseased. I don't see any residue of any decomposed larvae in there like foul brood would have. I can see under some of the caps there that the bees are almost ready to emerge. They look healthy and well developed. There's some pollen nearby. Wasn't malnutrition. There's a small cluster. So if we gathered up all those bees, we wouldn't even have a handful of them. Why did the older bees die? Why did their number decline? They couldn't cover the brood. Obviously the queen was doing her job. We can look on the bottom board, maybe we can gather some information from that. There's one mite, I see some varroa mites in there. There's a varroa mite there.
What does the mite look like again?
There's a mite right there. You see that? It's kind of oval shaped and it's reddish. There's one there, there's another one there. That's probably, there's a few mites, but not very many. We know that there wasn't enough bees in there to really maintain a cluster. So if the bees are, if there's less than a pound of bees, which would be softball size, there's usually not enough in that to gain enough momentum to keep going. So they've dwindled down till their numbers weren't sufficient enough to keep up the tasks they needed.
So even though the queen is producing brood, she's just not keeping up with the numbers that are dying?
Yeah, obviously this queen could. She was capable of it. We see brood there that was in good shape that never emerged, so they didn't have enough numbers to cover all that brood.
Oh.
So the life of the worker bees was probably shortened for some reason. Can't give a definite answer. Sometimes you can diagnose what's going on, sometimes you can't.
So if you look in your hive and you see that it's not very strong, what can you do to strengthen
The question we have is if your colony is weak, there's not enough bees to carry on, but there's not any obvious signs of disease, what can you do to boost that, to help them through, survive? If you have another colony that's in good shape, like this one here, we could take a frame of bees, frame of brood, frame of honey, whatever's needed, and use it to support the weak colony. Or you could do it the other way around. If there's no obvious signs of disease, but the bees are dwindling down in this one colony where they're not really able to maintain, I could take the weak colony and put them in my stronger colony and just increase the strength of my good colony.
They don't have problems giving new roommates?
So the queens will get together and fight, right? But the bees shouldn't.
So would you just let the queens duke it out, or would you take it one at a time?
If you were going to combine colonies into one, either take a frame of bees or resources from a strong colony to boost a weak one, or the other way around, what do we do with two queens? So I would take the queen that is the weakest one, and I would dispatch her and maybe wait for a little while till they know they're queenless, and they would be less likely to object to a new queen as I combine it with the other colony. The other stronger colony would defend their queen, so wouldn't really have to do that, but that's the safest way to do it. The question we commonly get about a colony that has died, there's no more bees in it, but they've left behind some honey. They still have some resources that could be used in another place. And if there's not an obvious sign of foul brood, then I would reuse this. Foul brood has a spore that can infect other colonies for years. So if it was just mites that they died from, I wouldn't worry about it. Once the bees are dead, so are the mites. You could reuse these frames with honey in it. The question is would I recycle, reuse a frame that had brood in it? The bees would clean out this dead brood in here. As long as that brood isn't sick or diseased, it wouldn't be a problem just to put this in and let them do it. Same on this side. You can help them out a little bit. It wouldn't hurt if you took your hive tool and cleaned that out for them. So you could scrape this back down to foundation. In this case, we have plastic foundation. That makes it easy to do. In the case with the metal bar frame, it would be easy enough just to take your hive tool and cut a piece of it out. And keep the clean, good wax and honey in the corner, cut out the piece of dead, moldy brood. Quite often, if there's dead brood in there, it'll start to mold, and even though they may be starting to rot or smell, it doesn't mean that they were sick. Here I just gathered that the work bees pulled away from that brood and left them unincubated so they couldn't emerge. If it's really bad, I'll scrape the whole frame down, and you can pressure wash that plastic foundation, clean it up however you can, put it back in. How often can you reuse it? there's recommended that you replace your old dark comb once every 3 years. So the reason for that is because over time the wax will accumulate pesticides that the bees may have encountered and brought in. It can harbor disease, bacteria, viruses, fungus can be trapped in the wax. So when it gets really dark, it's best to cull out your darker frames and put new foundation in, or if you're using the middle bar frame, just simply cut it out. The middle bar works well for that because quite often in the corners it's still a nice clean wax. In the middle is where you have trouble, and so you can simply just cut the darkest piece out, leave a little bit around the edge as a starter strip, a place for them to begin again and start over.